everybody. Welcome to Keto and Crime. Today I'm coming at you on Wednesday, May 22nd for what happened Tuesday, May 21st in the Chad Daybell case. If you are new here, welcome. I do true crime, dark history, horror movie reviews. I also do a holiday tree, which is currently stuck on Cinco de Mayo. I will be changing to some more of the patriotic holidays for the summer. Very, very soon, but I have a huge amount of videos on the Daybell case as well as live coverage of both trials that I try to condense into a small chunk that's easily digestible and understandable. So I am coming at you with what happened yesterday, Tuesday, May 21st. As you'll recall, on Monday, the 20th, was kind of an explosive day with two of Chad Daybell's children testifying and his son-in-law, one of his son-in-laws. And yeah, very telling. That video where I did a breakdown of that is right up there. But for now, I want to get into what happened yesterday. Yesterday was a very short day because of technical issues. Some of Pryor's witnesses weren't there and sidebars. Court was only actually in session with live testimony about 4.5 hours. So this should be a reasonably short update, but it all kicks off with Joseph Murray, who, as you know, is Chad, married to Emma Daybell Murray, with his cross-examination under Assistant District Attorney Prosecutor 𝗏𝗏 was the first high point of the day. So let's dive in and see what happened. So with Joseph Murray, being on the stand, 𝗏𝗏 does begin cross-examination. He talks about the loss of Tammy being a traumatic experience for Joseph's wife and sibling. Joseph agrees with that. He also agrees that finding the bodies of JJ and 𝗙𝗏 was also very traumatic. And he says that he and his wife, Emma Daybell Murray, have had many, many discussions over both of those things over the last few months and years. 𝗏𝗏 asks if Joseph has had many conversations with his siblings or the other Daybell siblings, and Joseph says they have not had. They have talked, but not have had many specific conversations around this. 𝗏𝗏 then asks about the attempted shooting of Tammy, and Joseph confirms he did not see the shooting. He learned about it from the Facebook post that Tammy put up in their Facebook group. He then asked Joseph about testifying during the grand jury, and that he has no personal knowledge of the shooting and how it went down. Joseph says that's correct. 𝗏𝗏 then asks about Joseph calling 911. 𝗏𝗏 asks about the meeting with Deputy Cannon and the fact that Joseph denied he ever heard Tammy scream. Joseph said that is correct. Joseph says he believes that Detective Cannon was intentionally inaccurate in his report when he said that Joseph heard her scream. Joseph said he was very clear when he explained it to him. Joseph said then after he gave his information to Deputy Cannon, he had no further conversations with Cannon. 𝗏𝗏 then asked Joseph about him needing to borrow Tammy's truck to help a friend with the potato harvest on October 18th. Joseph says it was his in-laws' truck and he went to Tammy to get her keys. Tammy had the truck at the school where she was working. Joseph got the keys, and when he was done with the truck, he returned it. He said that Chad Daybell gave he and Emma the truck in December of 2019. Then 𝗏𝗏 shows an exhibit on the screen. It's a bank account, preferably Joseph and Emma's joint bank account, and it shows that $8,000 was put into that account from Chad Daybell. 𝗏𝗏 emphasizes that in December 2019, Joseph gave his truck and then transferred the $8,000 into his account, and then he had to move into his house. Joseph agrees and confirms that all those things happened in December. He also confirms that Chad gave Emma $9,000 in cash around that same time. Joseph confirms. 𝗏𝗏 asks if Joseph has ever met Lori Vallow. He says yes. He says they met the day after Tammy's funeral at Chad's house. He says he never met Alex Cox and never saw Alex on Chad's property. 𝗏𝗏 asks about the lone driveway that was in question at the Daybell property. He also follows up with about Joseph testifying that Detective Hermosillo also drove past the property quite a bit. 𝗏𝗏 said it would be unusual that detectives would drive by the property if they assumed bodies were buried there. Joseph says that would not be unusual, but he said that 𝗓𝗂𝗪 continued to drive by even after the bodies were found. 𝗥𝗲𝗹𝗃 said it wouldn't be possible that a detective might continue to drive by after 2 bodies were found on a property. Joseph says he didn't think it was necessary. Joseph said he would rather be anything other than in law enforcement. So, yeah. 𝗥𝗲𝗃 then has nothing further. Pryor does a brief redirect and again shows that bank record, a 4th entry that also shows that Seth Daybell and some of the other Daybell children also got $8,000. They confirmed that they all got $8,000. So Chad somehow had $40,000, $48,000, $49,000 if you count the additional cash given to Emma for all his children. So he gave them all money. I guess he was just trying to get rid of his assets, probably so he could qualify for help with an attorney. But anyway, then there is a brief sidebar, and then Pryor calls his next witness, Dr. Kathy Raven, who is a certified anatomic, clinical, and forensic pathologist. She has worked in pathology for over 25 years. She is a full MD forensic pathologist and practices in California. She has testified in over 300 cases. Pryor asked Raven to review the autopsy reports and other materials, and he has asked her to come here to review what she found. Raven reviewed Dr. Christensen's autopsy report on Tammy Daybell from Utah, as well as other law enforcement investigation, and also reviewed Dr. Christensen's testimony. Pryor asked asks if the conclusion about the death in this case was correct. She explains that there are usually 5 manners of death: homicide, accident, suicide, undetermined, or natural. He then asks about Christensen's report on the autopsy and asks Raven if it was thorough. She said it was thorough. And then he asks about specifically the bruising and asks Raven what could have caused that bruising. Raven says it's unknown, it's unspecific, doesn't really point to anything. Raven says there was no anatomical cause of death for Tammy, meaning all her organs appeared fine. The toxicology report revealed nothing about poisoning. And then Pryor asked about the autopsy being done in December, 2 months after her death, and the signing of the report was 2 years later. Pryor asked why there was a gap. Raven says it's sometimes because toxicology testing can take months, and also the fact that the body had to be exhumed, that those are the reasons for the display. Raven then says that she, after reviewing all the notes, now she did not do the autopsy herself, she's only reviewing the autopsy that Dr. Christensen did, said that the cause of death should be undetermined because there was nothing anatomically wrong and the bruises were very nonspecific. It doesn't necessarily, what he's trying to get at is it doesn't necessarily mean asphyxia. Pryor follows up about asphyxia was that, absolute evidence that she was smothered. Raven says in her opinion that the bruises were not specific to asphyxia and that lots of things can cause asphyxia, but Tammy could have also died from natural causes with the bruises just being bruises, since we've already heard that she bruised easily. Pryor pretty much has nothing further, and then Lindsay Blake cross-examines. Blake asks Raven if she is a medical examiner. She says she has been in the past, but is currently an independent contractor. She's in a coroner office system. Blake asks who determines whether an autopsy can be conducted. She said it could either be a medical examiner, pathologist, or a coroner that determines that. Blake asks Raven about reviewing Tammy's autopsy report and other information. They go through the report, and she also says that it was only later that they decided to exhume Tammy's body because of the other bodies being found on the property, essentially, as well as some of the other shenanigans around the death. Raven says she has reviewed, basically admits she has never reviewed Tammy Daybell's medical records. She only reviewed the autopsy reporting and is just simply here to say that bruising is non-specific. But then Blake finishes up by asking if someone pretty much put a pillow or wrapped a plastic bag around somebody's head. Could there be bruising? She says, yes, there could be bruising from that. Blake has no further questions. And then Pryor asks if redirects, he says, if a plastic bag is placed over a head or a pillow without any evidence, would just be a hunch. So basically, he's just saying that what the prosecution is saying about the pillow or the plastic bag is just a hunch. Raven says, yes, Pryor has nothing further. Then there's a 30-minute break. There's a lot of discussion about the fact that when he was on his redirect with Raven, Pryor said the word murder in reference to Tammy Daybell. So there's a whole lot of discussion and shenanigans about that. And a lot of people, both the prosecution table and Chad Daybell himself, shit his pants when Pryor actually said the word murder when redirecting to Dr. Raven. So anyway, then Pryor calls his next witness. It is the Daybell's neighbor, Regan Price. Then they admit a exhibit. It's basically a report where Regan says that he heard the gunshots on September 9th. He said he isn't sure. He asked, are you sure it was on September 9th? She said she isn't sure, but guns often go off in that neighborhood. A lot of people own guns. They shoot. So it could have been coming from someone else. And she has talked to law enforcement a few times in reference to this case. Then there's some technical difficulties, but then they finally do play a recording of Regan talking to law enforcement in June of 2020. You hear her saying she heard a gunshot, and there was some discussion about raccoons. She says her and her husband discussed strange events that happened at the Daybells over the past year. She said they created a timeline to figure things out. Pryor asked Regan about her willingness to wear a wire or work through Joseph Murray to try and find the kids. Pryor asked Regan if she is engaged in any discussion with police for payment regarding the Daybell case. Regan says that Officer K comically told her they're not taking in any government funds. Pryor has no further questions. I don't know if he's just trying. He called this witness specifically to discredit her. This added nothing to their case. He's just wanting to show that perhaps she was coerced by law enforcement in some way to say about the gunshots and all the weirdness that she says happened around the Daybell's property over the past months. So he's just trying to discredit this witness. It added nothing to his case. Ingrid Beatty does cross-examine her. She asked Regan about hearing the gunshot. Regan says she doesn't remember the date or time frame. It was just that it was before September 9th, and she said it's common for there to be gunfire out in the country. Beatty asked Regan if she ever accepted payment from law enforcement. She said never, and Beatty has nothing. Pryor has nothing more. Pryor does redirect, and there's an objection from Beatty saying, why are you redirecting? There's no need to redirect here. They do have a quick sidebar with the judge, and basically they argue this back and forth. Pryor also points out that some of his witnesses are not yet in the courtroom, so they basically argue some witnesses about the validity of some witnesses for about an hour, and the entire courtroom is cleared as part of this discussion. Basically, there was some Rocky Wixom brings out that when Heather Daybell testified, he found an inaccuracy in her testimony. She basically had said something that turned out that she didn't exactly say it that way in a past report. No one seems to be concerned about this. And then they cleared the courtroom for further discussion, I would imagine, because Pryor is still wanting to redirect on Regan. So basically, it takes a little over an hour for the next witness to appear. But we do know that according to Boyce and Pryor, there's two more witnesses scheduled for today. Then they're back in the courtroom. And the next witness is Asmar Kariq, an investigator with the Idaho Attorney General's office. Now, Boyce did finally rule that because nothing new was brought out by Ingrid Beatty's cross-examination of Regan, that there's no need for a redirect. So 𝗂𝗃 originally worked on the case after former Fremont County prosecutor Marsha Murdoch asked the Attorney General to take over. And so he spent about 3.5 hours talking with Melanie Gibb, and Pryor asked why the interview took so long. 𝗂𝗃 says he had a lot to discuss and a lot of questions for Gibb. Pryor then asked 𝗂𝗃 if he asked anything about Gibb's personal beliefs. He says he didn't understand a lot of what Gibb was talking about, so he asked a lot of questions. Pryor asked 𝗂𝗃 to share some of what Melanie Gibb told him. 𝗂𝗃 says that Gibb spoke about a light and dark scale, and she was able to determine which person was light or dark. Gibb spoke about castings and vibrations. This entire interview took place in August of 2020. The investigator says he really didn't understand a lot about the belief, so it took a long time for him to understand where it was going. Pryor has nothing further. Beatty then cross-examines 𝗂𝗃. Beatty asks if Gibb told him that she created the light and dark scale. 𝗂𝗃 says Gibb did not. She said that Chad created the scale, but she, Lori, him, Alex, everybody adhered to that. And then there are no further questions. Next witness is quickly called. It is a retired Rexburg police detective, Rick Schmidt. Then there is a brief sidebar, and they ask the jury to leave the room. And then there's some more discussion about the Daybell property and this witness in general. And then Pryor asks about Schmidt's participating in the shovel work on the Daybell property in June of 2020. And then they talk about the fact that Schmidt's wife may have listened to a recording of the case, and therefore this witness is soiled in some way, but they eventually realize that Schmidt can testify, and he asks a few questions again about the search for the bodies and has no further questions. Rob Wood cross-examines. There's another sidebar where they talk about, again, Schmidt's relation to this case and the fact that he was there helping to search, and that Wood wants to provide a transcript of his previous testimony in the Vallow case, as well as his other statements to police to help refresh his memory. They allow that. Wood shows Schmidt the transcripts, and Wood asks where he was in relation to the boundaries. He said he was in the burn pit when he was doing his work, and that Wood ask him to clarify what he means by he was being handed a shovel and just walking around. Wood asked Schmidt the first thing he did when he arrived at the Daybell's property. He doesn't remember the first thing. He was instructed to carry a shovel and walk around. So basically this dude just walked around with a shovel during the thing and did really no searching. So Wood has nothing further, neither does Pryor. That was a complete waste of time because he knew nothing, remembered nothing, did nothing as far as the search. I don't know why he was even called. It's just like Regan. There was no reason. It did not add to Pryor's case. Now we find out that Pryor says because of witness travel, some of his witnesses are not here, so they do dismiss about 1 o'clock local time. So I think you can see that so far, out of the maybe 6 or 7 defense witnesses that have been called, 2 of them were completely useless. As far as his forensic expert, all she could confirm is that bruises can be nonspecific and don't necessarily show asphyxia, whereas then the prosecution was able to turn around and say it doesn't necessarily rule out asphyxia, and she had to agree with that. So outside of the jury finding any of his children, Emma, Garth, or his son-in-law, Joseph, credible, I don't see how this disproves or even pokes one doubt in the excellent case that the prosecution has built. The only reason, like I said, I think he called Regan was to discredit her, and he called Schmidt to try to discredit the entire search operation on the day that the bodies were found, the children's bodies were found. That is the only reason. He's just trying to find that little pinhole where he can poke a hole. I don't think it's working. I think it's making him look stupid. But, you know, everybody's entitled to a defense, and thank God for it. So with that being said, I'll be back tomorrow with what happened today, Wednesday, May 22nd, in the Chad Daybell case. Until next time, keep on crying.